So let's talk a bit about points of fragility in the political system, because I think this is something that in America, we have such deep confidence in our institutions, in our political culture, in our founding documents, in who we are as an advanced democracy, that we think very rarely, and we have a lot of trouble, I believe, thinking clearly about the ways in which those things can fail. These failures happen all the time in other countries. We see them all the time. They're reported on all the time. But we assume that is a phenomenon that is an other country kind of thing, not a thing that can happen to us. I think this year we're seeing that there are weak points that maybe we underestimated. The first one is the two-party system and what it suppresses. The Democrats are economically populist to a large degree, but they're highly cosmopolitan culturally. They see diversity as a source of strength, and they believe strongly that the safety net, that the welfare state, that populism should be built to benefit the poorest and the neediest, and to them, many of those people are immigrants, many of those people are non-white. The Republican Party is more socially traditionalist, it tends to be more nationalistic, but it is not particularly economically populist. It has an anti-tax pledge, which limits what kind of social spending it can do, and it is fundamentally very, very skeptical of government action and government security in ways that many of its voters are actually not. And what we're seeing now is that in cases where someone can end run the party system and speak to that coalition in American life, really significant changes can happen. Movements that we didn't see coming can turn out to be much stronger than we realized because they're not building support. They're taking advantage of a support that was already there and that the parties have been using sort of every trick in their books to suppress. So what has happened is the two parties have moved much, much, much further apart than they used to be. And what that's meant is that two things, well, a lot of things actually, but two that I want to talk about here. One is that the choice in a general election is very clear in a way it wasn't always before. And so it has become easier for the two parties to hold their base because crossover voting has become extremely, extremely unappealing to people. And that's allowed primaries to become more extreme. It used to be that in primaries, you could definitely see this in the Democratic Party for much of, say, the 90s and even the early 2000s. There was a real fear of nominating extreme candidates because the other candidate would be moderate, and you knew you had to win over a lot of swing voters. And so you had to try to get a candidate who would appeal to the median voter. But now, increasingly, both parties don't feel that way. Elections are much more about turning out your own base than they used to be. There are many fewer undecided voters because the two parties are so far apart that being undecided is increasingly bizarre and irrational and inexplicable. And so primaries have become much more powerful because to a much larger degree than used to be the case, Republicans and Democrats will vote for whoever is nominated. Early on in the race, something that we noticed at Vox was Bernie Sanders was polling very, very low, didn't have much money. His candidacy looked pretty unlikely to take off. And yet, whenever you wrote about Bernie Sanders, it got 15,000 Facebook shares. It got all the way to the top of Reddit instantly. And so very early in the race, Bernie Sanders began getting a lot of coverage, correctly, because there was a tremendous amount of intense support for his campaign. The media, you weren't seeing it in polls yet, but you actually could see it in terms of response to the articles. And so a lot more began getting written about Bernie Sanders. So related to that, the internet is disrupting gatekeepers. Has been doing that for a long time. It is amazing to think that we were probably very early in that process. The first real online campaign was Howard Dean's in 2004. We are 12 years after 2004. This is the beginning of the internet's disruption of American politics, not the end of it. The ability of candidates to speak to their followers disintermediated from both the media and political parties, the ability they have to raise money online and do it directly from their supporters over and over and over again. This, again, it changes the way in which institutions can control American politics. And it does that in ways that are better, and it does that in ways that are potentially worse. But it does do it. We used to be in a space where there was just an incredibly constricted flow of information and communication between campaigns and the people who might want to support them. It was mediated by the media, it was mediated by political parties, it was mediated by institutions that had incentives that were not always aligned with those of the candidate. Now the candidates have the capacity to mediate those relationships themselves. And that creates a possibility for candidates who in another era would be stopped by gatekeepers to break through and to some degree then take over the gatekeepers.